When things go wrong as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and the debts are high, and you want to smile but you have to sigh, when care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must but do not ever quit. Success is a failure turned inside out. Let's talk and clear the clouds of doubt.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk. I'm your moderator, Omar Dunlap. We have with us, as always, Brother Idris Tawfiq. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
And we have our very beautiful studio audience. Assalamu alaikum. The topic for today is leadership in the Muslim world, which is a very interesting topic. It's something I'm sure Muslims as well as non-Muslims would be very interested to know. What do Muslims think about this, the current condition of leadership in the Muslim world and Muslim communities throughout the world? So I hope you'll stay with us because it will be a very interesting show, inshallah. But before we get into that, I want to give Brother Idris just 10 minutes to give us some reflections from his mind that will speak to our hearts and get us prepared for today's show. So without further ado, Brother Idris.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala ashraf al-mursaleen Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Wa salamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaykum salam.
In the name of Allah, most gracious, most compassionate, all praise be to Allah, the Lord of the worlds. Peace and blessings of Allah be upon His final messenger Muhammad, and may the peace and the blessings and the mercy of Allah be upon all of you who are watching this program. As Brother Omar said, today we're talking about leadership in the Muslim world. Very interesting. And again, I'd like to reflect by beginning with a little experience of mine. A year ago, I visited Istanbul, in Turkey, the former capital of Turkey. And I was there for meetings with religious leaders, but I also had a little bit of free time on my own to travel around, to look at Istanbul. And for the first time in my life, I visited the mosque of Sultan Ahmed, the Blue Mosque. Absolutely magnificent mosque. And I went inside. And the tiles, the Iznik tiles, white tiles with pink and red roses, and a matching carpet, and I wept. I cried inside the mosque because it was such a clean place and such a beautiful place, and it made me think, this is what Islam is like. Islam is clean like this mosque, and it's beautiful and it's attractive. So I was very impressed in the mosque of Sultan Ahmed, the Blue Mosque. And then when you walk outside Sultan Ahmed Mosque, you walk around this whole area, and there are many fantastic monuments. There's Hagia Sophia, that for many centuries was a magnificent mosque. There's Topkapi Palace, which was the palace of the Ottoman rulers for many years. And there are other beautiful monuments around this area of Istanbul. And I looked at them and was quite overawed by how magnificent they are. And then I thought to myself, how did we ever get from this to the way we are in the Muslim world today? How did we get from the magnificence and the splendor of the Ottoman Empire to the way Muslims live today? And just thinking about that for this program, I was reflecting upon one of the very first leaders of the Muslim nation, one of the most wonderful caliphs of all, Umar ibn Abdulaziz. And you know, Caliph Umar, it's said that throughout his brief reign, any young man who wanted to marry was able to do so because the state provided the money for him to get married. Blind people received a salary from the state so that they were led round by the hand by guides provided for them. It's said that during the caliphate of Umar ibn Abdulaziz, no one went to bed hungry. Just imagine. And this man who was the caliph, the leader of the Muslim faithful, I read a beautiful story about him, that one night he didn't have a house. He didn't live in a palace. He lived in a tent. A tent. The leader of the Muslim nation. And when he died, he left nothing. He didn't have any possessions. And before he died, someone said to him, "But Caliph, what are you going to leave your children? You have no money." And he said, "Allah. I will leave them Allah." But the beautiful story was, one evening he was sitting looking at state papers in his tent with a candle to light the papers. And his wife, Fatima, came in. And she said, "My husband, can we spend some time together talking?" And he said, "Of course we can. Of course we can. But first of all, you must provide your own candle, because I can't use the candle of the state for private talk." He was so concerned with the money of the faithful. This was a man. This was a giant of a man. This was a Muslim. You know, and my thought for all of us, it's important for all of us not just to look at these stories and say, "Oh, how nice." But then we say to ourselves, okay, where do I fit into that? And you know, I reflect on the way we are today as Muslims. Not pointing the finger to anyone else. But I say to myself, you know, we are a people of Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim. We're a nation of mercy. And yet I say to myself, where has all the mercy gone? Once, you know, I lived in Alexandria in Egypt, and I got on the tram once, and all of the tram was packed, but there was a space where no one was sitting or standing, and there were 3 young men in handcuffs, and everyone was staring at them, and no one would go near them, and you could feel the condemnation in people's minds. Say, what have they done? Don't go near them. They could be murderers. They could be criminals. And of course, I once was a chaplain in a prison, so I had no problem with people in handcuffs. And I went to them, "Assalamu alaikum," and you could see the relief. Their shoulders went down. Someone is talking to us. But it made me reflect. We only spoke for a minute or two, then they got off. And I'm not interested in what they did. You know, whatever they did, they would be punished for if they committed a crime. But it should end at that, shouldn't it? There shouldn't be any more judging. We leave judging of people to Allah Almighty. We're not the judge and the jury saying, because you did this crime, we'll have nothing to do with you and we'll not talk to your children or your wife. You understand? So my message is very simple. My thought is very simple. If, as Muslims, maybe we don't have leaders anymore like Omar ibn Abdulaziz or any of the great caliphs or Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, we must ask ourselves, you know, do we deserve them? As Muslims, do we deserve leaders like that? Or maybe we deserve something else, because as Muslims, we are letting the Muslim nation down. It's easy to point and say, he isn't doing his job properly. The one at the top. You know, that's easy to do. And maybe he's not. But it's for Allah to punish him if he isn't. He will answer Allah on the final day of judgment and give an account of his stewardship of the people who he was in charge of to care for. But we can, instead of pointing at him, we can say, how am I living? How am I living as Khalifa in today's world, as being a steward, a regent of Allah's creation? How am I caring for the earth? Do I throw rubbish on the floor? If I do, I'm not caring for Allah's world. We're here to care for it. So as we reflect together, not only on leaders, whoever they are, and we needn't in this show be pointing fingers at this one or that one, we also should say to ourselves, how are you, Idris, living as a Muslim? What kind of leadership do you give in your home, you know, in school, at university, on the TV? What leadership are you giving? Is it one who is arrogant and rude and proud and boastful? Or is it someone who is kind and merciful and prayerful and honest? Insha'Allah.
MashaAllah. As always, a very heart-touching talk by Brother Idris. When we come back, we will see some questions that we've asked some people on the street regarding this topic. And we will also take some questions from our audience, so don't go away. We'll be right back, inshallah ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum.
Earth, the human heart, greed, exploitation, hatred, all diseases of the heart. For the cure, join Huda TV every Sunday at 20 GMT for Moments for the Heart.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to our show, Let's Talk. Today we're discussing the topic of leadership in the Muslim world. We've previously went out and just got random people off of the street and brought them in and asked them the question, are Muslim leaders playing their proper part, their full role in the world today? And I believe they have some very interesting answers to that question. Let's see what they have for us, inshallah.
On this episode of Let's Talk, we're talking about the role of Muslim leaders in the world. Now, can I ask you, Dr. Atif, what is the role of Muslim leaders, and do you think that Muslim leaders are playing that role properly?
Well, I think they don't play it properly, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so.
You think they are?
I think so.
No, I don't think they're playing the role right.
You don't?
No.
Why?
Because Islam is not going in the right track.
And you think we need some leadership on this?
Yeah, of course.
Well, I think that Muslim leaders are doing any part helping Islam to separate and making people get in it. In fact, our leaders' part is too short, doing prayers in the occasions like Eid, Adha or Feast Eid. That's it. They don't do anything to help Islam to separate all over the world. I mean, we can see them fight Islam by preventing evil and not allowing girls who wear it to get into the university or announce at the TV to show with the evil.
Okay, there's a distinction here. We're not just talking about presidents of countries or kings, but we're talking about Muslim leaders, muftis, scholars. Are they playing the role they should play?
No, not in the perfect way. They are playing a very short part in that opinion.
I think that no one of us, even with Muslim leader or mufti or even president or me as a normal person, can do anything for Islam. It is all from Allah. Allah only who can protect it and save it. Allah khayr hafizan, as He said in Quran. So what we can do, just to represent or to show or to make the good picture of Muslim to be appear to other people, no more.
So do you think there's enough leadership in the Muslim world?
I don't think they goodwill or they do anything for Islam. I don't ask them for doing anything. What I just ask them to do, just being good Muslims.
Well, that was very interesting, Brother Idris. What are your thoughts on what we just heard?
Well, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, I didn't know what to expect, really. And we got sort of two extremes. One extreme was that these leaders, whoever they might be, are doing nothing. They're not playing their role at all. And then the other one, the last one we heard, was, well, none of us can do anything anyway. It's all up to Allah, so there isn't really anything any of us can do. So I'd say that the responses were kind of negative, which is very interesting, because the topic we're talking about doesn't really usually encourage enthusiasm from Muslims about leadership. But remember, we're talking about leadership in the Muslim world, not about particular Muslim leaders in this place or that place. We're talking about leadership, where leadership should come from, who gives the leadership, what we need as leaders. We're not pointing fingers at this one or that one. Now, what do the audience think?
Do we have any questions from our audience?
Yes.
You first, and then we'll come to you.
Okay.
Go ahead. Okay.
That it's a general question, which is does leadership means only to lead people, or to be responsible for any country or for countries, or it has many other meanings or any other meanings?
I didn't quite catch it. Just repeat it again, brother. Tell me again.
Does leadership mean only to lead people or to be responsible for people for countries, or it has many other meanings or in other meanings?
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think that's at the heart of what we're talking about today. There are different kinds of leadership. You know, there are some people who are called to be in charge of a country or to play a part in the government of a country. That's one group. But before we go to the next group, we shouldn't assume that just because people are in charge of a country with a majority of Muslims in that country, we needn't necessarily assume that those people are Muslim leaders. They're leaders of a particular country. Whether we could call them Muslim leaders is another program. That's a different thing altogether. They're leaders of a country with a lot of Muslims in it. So that's one thing. But the other thing you're saying, brother, is that maybe that there's another kind of leadership too. There's leadership in your university. You know, there's leadership in your mosque. There's leadership in your home, in your household. There's different. Now we're not setting our standard low here. We're not saying because in the Muslim nations leadership is so poor we have to look for it somewhere else. We're not saying that. We're saying there are two kinds. As Muslims we can expect what any human being can expect. We can expect good, honest, strong people to lead our countries. We can expect honesty and mercy and justice, and we don't expect injustice and bad things from our leaders. So not just Muslims, but all people expect that. It's not just for Muslims. But yes, there are other kinds of leadership that come from different places, that at different levels and different scales. So yeah, there's leadership from different areas, brother. I think you've hit the nail on the head with that one.
Before we move on to our next question, I actually have a question, because his question brought a question to my mind. He was saying that what exactly is leadership? And obviously my mind starts thinking, well, is there anything that the Prophet ﷺ said about leadership? And I remembered something. He said, certainly the leader of a people is also their servant. He's also their servant. I was wondering if you could tell me what does that hadith bring to your mind when you look to the current state of the Muslims?
Well, before the current state of Muslims, it calls to mind our beloved Prophet himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because when visitors came to Medina, they would go into the mosque, the Prophet's mosque, upon him be peace, and they had to say to people, excuse me, which one is Muhammad? Which one? Which one is the head of the state? And it's that man there sitting in a row of other men praying in actually quite shabby clothes that he darned himself with a needle and cotton. You know, he wasn't sitting on a throne or guarded by soldiers or have a rope around him. They had to say, oh, that's him, by the way. That one over there is the leader. So in all countries in the world, let's not just think about majority Muslim countries. I don't use the word Muslim countries, by the way. I use majority Muslim countries, where the majority of the population is Muslim. Go for all of the countries in the world, and yeah, I don't think we find many leaders or rulers or prime ministers or whatever it might. We don't find these kind of people who are servants of their people. I don't think we do.
No, I wouldn't think that either.
I mean, for example, I saw on the TV last night, there was a program about President Cory Aquino in the Philippines. And she was standing against President Marcos to be elected as the president in the presidential elections. And Marcos had ruled the country with very firm hand for many, many years. And she was just a housewife. And she said she stood up at this election rally and she said, people say to me I have no experience to run this country. And she said, I admit before you, I don't have any experience of lying and cheating and stealing. And I believe she was a very good, simple person. So they're few and far between, I think, in answer to your question, though, these kind of people who are simple. But then again, we can't judge people too much because we're not the ruler of that country. We don't know the burdens that are put on these people. It's easy to judge people very quickly. But there are certain things we can expect of them, and that one is justice. I think it's fair to assume we're all entitled to justice, and that the law be applied to all people fairly and equally.
What do you think the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ meant when he said servant in that hadith?
Servant?
Yeah, when he said the leader of a people is truly their servant. What do you think he meant by the word servant?
Well, a servant is one who serves.
Right.
A servant is one who is at the disposal of his people. Like we mentioned at the beginning, Omar ibn Abdulaziz, his entire caliphate was at the service of the people.
So I think sometimes anybody in a position of leadership could forget that you're only there. Your only job is to take care of the people below you. You have no other job. Your job is to take care of those people. And I just think that's interesting in light of that prophetic hadith.
And many are the people, not only in the history of Islam, but also in the history of other countries.
Right.
But maybe in Muslim countries, and people have turned down the opportunity to lead their nation because they have said, on Judgment Day, I will have to answer to God for how I carried out the responsibility He gave me, and I'm not prepared to take that responsibility. Right. So it is a very great responsibility.
MashaAllah. Do we have another question from our audience?
Yeah,
Go ahead, brother.
Really, I have no question, but I want to mention an important expression to Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal. He said, لو كانت لي دعوة مستجابة لجعلتها للحاكم. If I have an accepted da'wah, I will ask Allah to reform the leader or the caliph, to make the leader or the caliph good man. This is what I want to say.
Now this brings up an interesting topic that brings a question to my mind. Some Muslims, they get frustrated with their leaders or leaders of other countries, and they will actually pray make dua against their enemies. Me personally, I kind of view this as counterproductive, because if Allah punishes them, that means He may make them not fulfill certain responsibilities. I think we want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide them and give them wisdom, but maybe I'm wrong. What do you think about that?
Well, I've visited some countries. We won't mention their leaders' names.
Right.
And at the prayers at the end of Friday prayers, I've heard people saying, we ask Allah Almighty to bless such and such a person as he leads his people. Now, rather than calling the wrath of Allah down upon people,
right,
I think we can ask Allah to bless those who've been chosen by whatever method to lead us, to bless them, rather than to curse them.
Right.
To that their attitudes and their policies and their behavior will be for the good of the people they are there to serve, as you say. So I think we can support, as Muslims, we can support one another with prayer. But again, we've fallen into the trap of thinking that this leadership is just people right up there,
top, yeah,
you know. In America, for example, there's one man who's the president, but people all talk about the 100 senators who lead the country and the however many congressmen they have, and then they have governor. There are many. It's like a cascade of people in authority.
Right.
Not just one person. So some countries have that system, others have different systems. May Allah bless them all, I say.
And guide them and
guide them
make them do the right thing.
And give us good, honest, just people. And you know, sometimes, Allah tells us that a nation will not be changed until it changes itself first.
Now this is something very interesting, because typically the world tends to think that change comes from the top and trickles down. The Muslim position is not that at all. The Muslim position, according to this verse from the Quran, is that actually change comes from the bottom.
That's right.
And I just thought that was very interesting. Do you have a comment?
And not change either in the kind of way that the world thinks about change. It means people being better.
Right.
It doesn't mean getting rid of this system or that system. It means the system or the whole setup won't change until the people are better. The people are better themselves.
And you know, this is a very empowering position because it means you can do something.
That's right.
On an individual on an individual basis. We only have just 30 seconds left, so I guess we'll go ahead and go to a break now. We'll be right back with a very special guest, inshallah. So don't go away. It's a very interesting topic today, and we're glad you're with us. We're glad that you're with us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
True life of the Muslim starts at death. If you wish to enhance your knowledge of the Islamic perspective on the hereafter, this life doesn't go on forever, but we do so little to prepare for it because most of us don't know what happens after this life ends. If you want to be amongst those who know, then join us every Saturday at 1930 GMT for the inevitable journey.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to this wonderful show, Let's Talk. We have with us, as always, Brother Idris Tawfiq. And the topic we're discussing for today is leadership in the Muslim world. What are the responsibilities of a Muslim leader? What are the rights of the people under a Muslim leader? This sort of topic, this sort of general topic, and we have a lot to discuss today, inshallah. Brother Idris, would you like to introduce our guest?
I'd be delighted to. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Our guest today is Brother Wa'il Shihab. He is Deputy Managing Editor of the Sharia Department at islamonline.net. Brother Wa'il, you're very, very welcome. You're also a doctoral student at Al-Azhar University in Sharia.
Yeah.
So you honour us, bringing your knowledge to us and your experience from Islam Online. Let me go right in with a difficult one for you, first of all. Our beloved Prophet Muhammad ﷺ calls the Muslim nation the best nation on earth. Allah Almighty tells us that we are of all nations the best nation, a mercy to mankind as a nation.
That's right.
Why is it we have no leadership in the Muslim world today?
Yeah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, I wanted to thank you for giving me the chance today to be with you. As for the question, in fact, I disagree with you to some extent because now we have very, very successful leaders in the Muslim world, whether in the West or in the East. We have good models for leadership in the Muslim world and outside where Muslim minorities are living among non-Muslims.
Could you give an example?
We have many examples. I have been to America, I have been to Europe, and I met many Muslim leaders that used to educate their community and to help them be integrated into the society and to keep their Muslim identity. Many of them, really, I don't like to name some of them, but if you go to America, you will find some Muslim institutions that lead the community. For example, we have the ISNA, the AMGA, we have the European Council for Fatwa and Research, we have some Muslim institution in Europe and in Muslim countries that lead the people to what is best in this world and in the hereafter. Therefore, I believe that we have many successful models for leadership. But
okay, let's leave that to one side because that's very positive.
Yeah.
And we want a positive note. But we also just want us to explore a little bit first. Leadership in the sense of leadership right at the top. And when we compare some of the leaders we had in the past with some of the leaders maybe there are in Muslim nations today, ordinary Muslims watching the program will be saying to themselves, but where are these leaders? So instead of naming names and saying this one or that one,
Yeah.
what would you, from your background, of your knowledge of Islam, what are the qualities of a Muslim leader?
Yeah, there are some qualities that Muslim scholars have dealt with and elaborated about the Muslim leader and the successful Muslim leader. For example, Imam Al-Hasan Al-Bisri, the well-known Muslim scholar, says that Al-Imam Al-Adil is the one who stood among people, who listened to Allah and makes people to listen to Allah, the one who is led by Sharia and leads people to the Sharia. Therefore, in our early fiqh tradition, scholars used to say that the Imam or the leader should be a mujtahid, who can give ijtihad and fatwas on new cases that face the Muslim community. But in later generations, some of them recognized that it will be difficult in the coming centuries to find one who has the knowledge to be a mujtahid and at the same time is aware of the politics and other sites that a leader should have knowledge about. Therefore, they said that the Muslim leader could be a muqallid for the early leaders of Islam, and it's enough for him to have consultative groups to give him advice in fiqh issues or in Sharia issues, in political issues, in economic issues, and so on. Therefore, the first important qualification of a leader that is knowledge. A successful leader should have knowledge, should also be skillful, should be intelligent to lead the people, and should be aware of the ongoing circumstances around him. He should be aware of what's going around him on his country and in other parts of the world.
So you're saying well-rounded knowledge of the religion, knowledge of the political stage that we're in right now, the circumstances of different countries, as well as being wise. You know, all of these attributes of a great leader. Specifically a great Muslim leader.
So let's throw another thing into the pot, because in Europe especially, there's a big discussion, and it often causes problems with governments when Muslims talk about the re-establishment of the caliphate. Now, all Muslims believe that a caliphate will one day be re-established.
Yeah.
But what do we mean by that? Do we mean that there'll be one person ruling the world, ruling the Muslim world? Is that what we mean? Is that what we aspire to? What exactly do we mean by it?
Now, in our age, we could have a different perspective of the Islamic Caliphate, because it's really hard nowadays to have a single state to govern and lead other Muslim states. I believe that one union may be enough now if the Muslim world is unified under a single union. It could do to some extent the role of the early Muslim Caliphate. It's our wish to have a single Muslim.
So you mean something like the organization of the Islamic Conference, something like that?
But something
because that's impotent,
more
really.
Influential, something more influential that deal with all affairs. You may, for example, give the example of the United States of America. It's a federal state, something like federal state, that each country has its own ruler, but on the top there's a one person who can decide and who can consult other rulers for the sake of the Muslims all over the world. We have different shapes of caliphate, and our modern scholars try their best to decide what is best in our modern age, because we are in a modern age. We should understand the situation we are living now, and from that point we should decide the best for a Muslim unity that gather all Muslim states and all Muslim communities around the world. We have Muslim minorities in Europe who are living among non-Muslim population. We need to have them attached to a Muslim identity. Therefore, we could plan for a one Muslim identity that gather most, if not all, Muslim communities and countries. If it's possible, it's
if it's possible, that's the question. I mean, there are cities in Europe that I know of. I won't name them, but there are cities in Europe where on one side of the road you have a mosque belonging to one ethnic tradition, and across the road you have a mosque belonging to another ethnic tradition, and when they come out of prayers on a Friday, they can't even offer each other Salaam Alaikum. So how achievable is what you're saying, brother?
Yeah, really it's a disaster. I know what you are speaking about now, and I myself have seen some of such disastrous scenes. Now we need to unify Muslims. We need to educate Muslims about how Islam unifies them all under saying that La ilaha illallah and Muhammad Rasulullah. We may be of different schools of fiqh, we may be of different thoughts, but at the end of the day we are all Muslims. Therefore, I really admire the idea of Sheikh Yusuf Qaradawi to have a unity for all Muslim scholars, that is the International Union for Muslim Scholars, and which gathers scholars from different sects. That union has Shiite scholars, it has Ibadi scholars, it has Salafi scholars, it has Shafi'i scholars, and it has different schools of fiqh and thoughts. I think a Muslim caliphate in our time can be something like that, an identity that gather all Muslims, even to accept their differences and diversity, because it's a diversity within a unity. We are all Muslims, therefore we have to be united under the leadership of a Muslim identity.
MashaAllah, brother, what you're saying is wonderful. There is no doubt that in the Muslim world, I mean, we're not saying anything controversial, in the Muslim there is a lot of backwardness. As a result of many things such as colonialism and deliberately planting the seeds of strife and trouble in the Muslim world. For example, one thing I see as being so obvious, but we often don't admit it, in the Middle East, Muslims live the greatest time in Palestine, the greatest time in the history of Palestine in Jerusalem was when the Ottoman Empire included all the peoples of the region, and our problems seemed to come when these Western powers came and offered people countries and drew lines in the sand, and you're a country now, and where countries never existed before, creating these divisions in the one nation. So there is backwardness. What you're saying is at the level of scholarship and of educated people, people who understand quite well, but for ordinary folk in the street, that's not going to set their hearts on fire talking about a committee of scholars. How can we explain it in a simpler way to ordinary Muslims when they want to know where this leadership will come from?
Yeah, I see that it's a Muslim identity. I don't say that it should be an identity of scholars or a group of scholars, but it's a Muslim identity that could gather most, if not all, Muslims around it. The OIC could be that example, but it should be more influential and it should be more powerful. It needs more support from the states, and it needs more support from Muslims to be more developed and to have more influence into the world. I don't say that scholars should lead and govern the world, but I see that we need a single identity that unifies Muslims as much as possible, even to give Muslims a sincere advice, to say that now Muslims should do that or that. That's my point.
You see, as Muslims, we're never downcast, or we should never be downcast. Our heads are always held high because the victory belongs to Allah, and when we forget that, we forget what's important in life. So the victory does belong to Islam and to Allah. Of that we have no doubt. But before that final victory comes, you did mention, and perhaps this is where we can head towards the end of our section, you told us about leadership not on the level of rulers of countries, but a different kind of leadership. You mentioned ISNA and different organizations. Tell us a bit more about that and what sort of role these organizations are playing in the Muslim world today.
Yeah, such a kind of leadership now are playing a good and important and significant role in guiding Muslims in most of the world, and Al-Azhar also is playing such a role in guiding people and the Muslims to what they should do in terms of their acts of worship, in terms of dealing with others who are living with them. Now, from day to day, we face new and novel problems that needs guidance from Muslim leadership in different fields and in different areas. We face problems in Sharia issues, we face problems in political issues. We are therefore in need of guidance. We are in need of people, leaders, to tell us what should we do. You remember, for example, the Danish cartoon and Muslims' reactions to it all over the world. Some Muslims overreacted to the problem, but others reacted moderately. We saw Muslims all over the world are for defending the Prophet's cause, and at the time some good Muslim leaders said that our duty is to let the other know more about Muhammad. They insulted him because they don't know more about him. They ignore, they don't know much about Prophet Muhammad. They ignore about his moralities. Therefore, we need a true Muslim leadership that educate Muslims about their duties and their rules in our today time.
Okay, so final question then. For most Muslims, for the man in the street, for Ahmed and Ibrahim and Mustafa, and for Marwa and Sarah in the street, their leadership comes from the mosque. Many of them look no further than their local mosque. So what then would you say, Brother Wa'il, from your background of Sharia and experience, what qualities do we need in our imam in the mosque as the leader of the Muslim community?
Yeah, let me first say that leadership is not coming from the masjid. In a wonderful hadith, Prophet Muhammad, peace be on him, elaborated that everyone is a leader and is a guardian and is responsible for those who are under his responsibility. He says that the head of the state is responsible for those who are under his responsibility. The man in his house is responsible for his household. The wife is responsible for her house. Therefore, every one of us should be a leader in his place. That's.
We are all Khalifa.
You act as a Khalifa because Allah Almighty says, "Inni ja'ilun fil ardi Khalifa," and every human being should be the Khalifa of Allah on earth. You should educate your children. Your wife should educate her children, and so on. Everyone should play that role and lead those who are under his authority to the right way, the way of Allah Almighty.
MashaAllah.
That's my point.
MashaAllah. Finally, the Imam. Then just tell us about the Imam.
The Imam, there are some qualifications that the Imam should have. First of all, the Imam in the Masjid, as Imam Ibn al-Qayyim said, should be aware of the ongoing circumstances, should be well aware of what is happening here or there. He should read, he should listen to the news daily to know more about what is going on in his country and in all other parts of the group. Second, he should be well versed in the science of Sharia. He should be a good reciter of the Quran. He should be well versed in the science of Hadith, the science of Usul al-Fiqh, and so on. Therefore, we have two main qualifications that a good Imam should meet. first, to be well versed in the sciences of Sharia, and second, to be aware of the ongoing circumstances, whether around him or in any part of the globe.
SubhanAllah. I think we're going to have to ask Brother Wa'il to come back another time.
I think we might have to, inshallah.
Fascinating, brother.
Inshallah. Well, I think we'll close out this segment, inshallah. I would like to end it on just a little note of hope, because there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. He said that the Muslims will eventually be the leaders of Rome, which hasn't happened yet. And we know there are many hadith where there are prophecies like this that have been fulfilled. For example, Muslims taking over Constantinople, this happened and so on. But this actually hasn't happened yet, which means that it will. It means that the Khalifa will be reestablished. There will be a leader that will accomplish this objective.
Sorry, Brother Omar, if you allow me.
Go ahead.
I believe that such leadership could be spiritual.
Of course. Yeah, we're saying this exactly.
We could lead them in scholarship.
Right.
On scientific
progress. Yeah, we're not saying a war or something. We're
Yeah.
saying that just someone or a group of Muslims will become leaders in some fashion. They will reignite the iman in our hearts, and you will see a big change in the world when that happens, inshallah ta'ala. And we look forward to that. We're going to go to a quick break, and we'll come back, inshallah. We will answer some questions from our audience, and we'll take some of your emails, inshallah. So don't go away. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So this is an open invitation for everybody to recognize God and enjoy His blessings in this life and His mercy in this life and in the hereafter as well. Allah, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. Each name has a meaning. Each name signifies a nature of Allah the Almighty which no one shares or is compared to Allah in it.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to our final segment of today's show of Let's Talk. We're discussing leadership in the Muslim world. It's been a very interesting show. We had a very interesting guest. We had many interesting questions from our audience. And of course, Brother Idris, as always, has been giving us very powerful little gems from his mind. I don't know how he can think of those answers right off the top of his head, but mashallah, he does it very perfectly. In this last segment, we want to go to our audience before we get to our emails and ask if there are any more questions about the topic today. Go ahead, brother.
I have a comment or an addition from your hadith, Mr. Omar, and he's saying that your first hadith that the servant is the leader, or the servant of people is their leader. That we can deduce that our Prophet, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, commands us to serve or commands our leaders to serve the people. As a principle of the principles of leadership. The second thing that I want to say, I want to deduce from my brother's saying about Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, that we should not always condemn the leaders. But we should pray for them. I'm sorry, to invoke Allah to help them in their responsibilities.
And if they have some. If they have some bad intentions, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Qawi wa al-Qadir. He can change that like that. He would have no problem.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that, Brother Idris?
Well, my immediate thought on that last thought is, all of us on Judgment Day will give an account to Almighty Allah for the way we've lived our lives. All of us will. Whether we're high or low or whoever we are. And this is it's the beauty of Islam. To me, it's one of the most beautiful things. Islam is just. Allah is just. And people who've led very difficult lives and very poor lives all through life, they've struggled just to find the money to eat, or they've been very sick, or they've had terrible trials, but they've lived good lives and tried their best to be good Muslims. Their reward will just be wonderful. They will be living in gardens, dressed in garments of green silk, with bracelets of pearls and of gold. Just imagine. Poor people who've had nothing to eat, this will be their reward. And then there will be other people who had everything in this world. They had every opportunity. And they had people at their beck and call saying, you do this, and they did it. And you do this, and they misused that was given to them. And they will be punished for all eternity. That is the justice in Islam. So, it isn't for us to punish. It's for us to vote, of course. But we leave the punishing to Allah. And Allah will judge between good and bad. And each one of us, on Judgment Day, let's question our own hearts rather than someone else's heart. I fear Judgment Day because of my sins. So enough for us to think about ourselves instead of saying this one or that one. And of course, all of our answers on this topic, we're speaking within the constraints of what it's appropriate to say.
Right, mashallah. Do we have another question, a comment? Yes, brother, go ahead.
The question is, how can we use meaning of leadership in everyday life? How can we apply, how can we show it to others?
You mean like on an individual basis? How can me as a normal person,
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Well, just with your friends. You're at university, yes? You're in the 3rd year? Engineering. Yes. MashaAllah. Well, you will have groups, groups of friends. Well, every group of friends has a leader. There's always one who leads the group, And you see this with many people. They're led by the wrong type of people. People get we use the phrase being led astray. You see young people being led astray by they're following the wrong type. They have the wrong friends. Well, it's if we take our deen, our Islam seriously, we have a role to play as leaders, as Khalifa. I was in Malaysia not too long ago, and I was invited by a wonderful group of people called Al Khalifa Institute. And the whole focus of their thought was how we are Khalifa of Allah in everything we do. In everything, in our homes, as husbands and wives and fathers and, and mothers, at work. Each one has his role to play. We can't all be the leader. We can't all be chiefs. You need some Indians you need chiefs as well as Indians. So it isn't our role for us all to be at the top. Some have to do as they're told, and others give the orders, So each one has to play his part. Certainly with your friends, for example, at university, you can play a leadership role. It doesn't mean telling people you do this and you do that and we can lead by example. Isn't that a phrase we use? Leading by example. We don't need to be in charge. And often in life too, when you're thinking of countries, someone might be in charge of the country, but the ordinary people are being inspired not by her or by him, but they're being inspired by someone altogether different who has no role. Think of this lady in Burma, in Myanmar. She's been in prison under house arrest for how many years? 20 years? She has no official role in the country. And yet she's been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. She has people queuing outside her door to try and catch a glimpse of her. And the whole nation is looking to her for leadership. And the only leadership she can give is every so often appear at the gate of her house and smile. And she has millions following her, and the whole world supports her. So, we lead by example. We don't need to be in a position of authority to lead. And sometimes we don't even to say a word for people to follow us. Good example is, throughout these programs we're talking about how as Muslims we lead and live good example, and people will be better Muslims because of it. So I think, in our friends at home, we can teach our little brother. That's leading. When he does something wrong, correct him, not in a harsh way, but say, Ya Ahmed, do it like this. Don't use your left hand, use your right hand. That's leadership.
MashaAllah. Well, I think this is a part of our show where we'll go to our emails. We have one here from Faisal, and he heard you speak in New York, actually. And he's asking an interesting question. He said, I hope we can talk about Muslims living in the West on Let's Talk. And he also asked, can you explain to me and to others why you use the phrase Islam in the West rather than Islam and the West?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In fact, he is either a mind reader or he has some secret information. Because as well as Islam in the West, we're having another program, I'm not sure when we'll have it, and it's called Islam in the West. Now, I'm a great believer that this is the century of Islam in the West. There are communities of Muslims in North and South America, in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, in Australasia, that are giving such fantastic example as Muslim communities. You know, that they would teach what is seen as traditionally the Muslim world. They teach them many things. And I think because many of these communities in the West, they've grown up being very comfortable with free speech and with different cultures and with the role of women holding positions in society and different democracy, and they're very comfortable with these things and understand them from an Islamic point of view, but they're comfortable with them, they don't feel threatened by them. And I think these communities have a lot to teach other parts of the Muslim nation that aren't comfortable with those things. And these people in New York and in Australia, you know, they can speak a language of Islam that the rest of the world can understand. You know, it's no good anymore for us to talk in slogans or just be quoting the past all the time. We need to be in the present as well as the past. The past is so important to us, but we live in the present. If we don't, we have no future. We won't be living in the future. So Islam and the West is what we've been talking about in one program. Islam in the West talks about Muslims who are actually in the West, living their lives in the midst of maybe a majority of non-Muslims.
Well, that's a very good answer, and it's been a very great show. We thank Brother Idris and our guest today, and we thank our studio audience for being with us, and we thank our viewers at home as well, and we hope that we've been able to affect some change through this show. We're trying our best to bring you a good quality show, and I think we're achieving that so far.
We're getting that. Let's mention the email.
Oh, yes.
Talk@huda.tv.
Yes.
Talk@huda.tv.
You can email us your questions, and we'll get back to you on the air, inshallah ta'ala. We hope to see you next time. That's all the time we have for you today, but we really enjoyed having you with us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
When things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and the debts are high, and you want to smile but you have to sigh, when care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but do not ever quit. Success is a failure turned inside out. Let's talk and clear the clouds of doubt. Success is a failure turned inside out. Let's talk and clear the clouds of doubt.